Hi, this is Quinn Costello with SF Indie Fest, and I am here with some of the filmmakers of The Problem of the Hero. We have Ayanna Johnson, who is a producer. We have J. Mardreese Henderson, who played Richard Wright in the film. And we have David Zumbrennan, who, in addition to playing Paul Green, is also an executive producer. And thank you all so much for being here and for taking part in this Q&A, and really looking forward to digging into this really provocative film. So maybe Ayanna, start with you. Can you kind of give us a little more background into the source material for this film and how you personally kind of came to be connected to the project, and then what that adaptation process was like?
Okay, so David actually answers this much better, but I will try my best.
I'll chime
Um,
in with whatever details
Mhm.
are pertinent.
okay, so David and Serena Zambranin actually have a theater company as well, and they have performed. Josh and David have been performing the Native Son theater adaptation of this film for years now. And I'll let David get into the details of how we came about making this as a film instead. But basically, the script was written by Ian Finley and James A. Hodge, and they worked together really well, digging into um, facts about both characters in order to bring this project to life. I came about it because I actually worked as an actor on a different production with the director of photography for this piece, and they needed something last minute on that production, and I just jumped in to help them. And he was, I guess, impressed. So he mentioned me to David, and I interviewed with David, and the rest is history. So now I'm on this project. It's been a blast to work with the Zumbrunins and with Jay on this project. The entire cast and crew have been awesome to work with, and very dedicated to the craft and to bringing this piece to life.
Yeah, and I'll chime in since Anna referenced that I'll probably have some of the historical references on how this piece was and how this project was generated. And I will say with these two individuals that are accompanying me in the interview, Ayana and Jay, when we first met both of these individuals to be involved in this project, it was immediately apparent that we wanted these two involved. So I'll just say that right up front, okay, just right up front, and full disclosure. But the piece started out, the project as a whole started out as a theatrical stage play. Um, we were approached to pursue um, a project that would perhaps expand upon people's awareness of who Paul Green was, who was a Pulitzer Prize winning playwright from the early 20th century, a social justice advocate who was prominent in North Carolina for social justice activism and in the southeastern part of the United States and his advocacy against the death penalty. He used a lot of his work and his craft and his writing to pursue his social justice advocacy. Um, as we researched the project and got deeper into what Paul Green's life was and his work, we then discovered the collaboration that he had with Richard Wright on the Broadway adaptation of Richard Wright's novel, Native Son, which has been in the canon of African American literature and 20th century literature for quite a while, although that has been diminished over recent years. We developed a play based on that. Ian Finley's wonderful stage play uh, toured pre-COVID. We were touring the East Coast with Jay, and once COVID shut it down, the piece has not been performed since that time. But we actually were encouraged to adapt it into a feature film and a screenplay, where James
Mhm.
A. Hodge came into the picture and Ayana. The film, I should note, was actually filmed. The principal photography, and we'll get to this, I'm sure, later, but the principal photography of the film was completed, uh, almost completed before COVID, before the COVID lockdown, and before a variety of other events that have unfolded since that time, and that was in 2019, early 2020. So I should mention that the George Floyd murder had not occurred yet. January 6, 2021 had not occurred yet. So a lot of this was filmed before those seminal dates.
And so just so I'm understanding that the source material is drawn from a theater piece that was developed that itself was drawn from work that Richard Wright had created, right?
Yeah, can we get more meta than
Go,
that?
Very
I,
nice. Very nice.
it took me a few times to kind of piece together, what where it was drawn from, and yet I don't think that it's that important to know all those details, but it's really interesting to, I think, to peel back those layers and to see that where this story kind of is rooted in the kind of, I think it informs the kind of questions that the film asks,
Yeah. And while the play was pretty much a dramatization of true life events based on
Yeah.
true life events between Paul Green and Richard Wright's collaboration on adapting the Native Son stage play for Broadway, I should note that the film actually is adapted not only in the stage play, but some of Native Son, but also a small play itself by Richard Wright that has never been published, that we were very kindly supported by the Wright estate to include as part of the theme, and we actually use some of it directly in the film itself. Richard Wright's play, called The Problem of the Hero.
It's fascinating that it's able to kind of pull together all of these different kinds of influences, and it felt very current as well. It felt like it had kind of benefited from being viewed through all these different lenses. Jay, can you kind of talk a little bit about what was it about the dynamic between these two men that drew you towards the material, and what were the questions that were being asked that you thought were compelling when you were first kind of engaging with the
Sure.
project?
So I think at the heart of this story, at the very foundation of the story, is that there is a friendship between these two men. There's a respect between them. They're not only are they literary contemporaries, they're friends. They care about each other, and I think that makes the conversation and or argument that they have a lot more palatable. I think Mr. Wright, Richard doesn't come in as the angry Black man, and Paul doesn't come in as the white savior. They're just two friends who are working together on this project that they both have are very, very invested in. And so that leads to them having this conversation that takes a tangent and goes several different places. I don't want to give any spoilers out, but we go from there's socioeconomic elements, there's religion, there's politics, of course, there's we go into the backgrounds of these characters and see how they were shaped and formed. That's also reminiscent of the story that they're working on together. It's very, very meta. It's a story about a story that took place, and all that's going on. But I think what drew me to this, because I actually had never heard of Richard Wright before this piece. I don't know if that tells my age, or it reveals a lot about me, but that was my lot in life at that point. And once I was introduced to not only this play, but Richard Wright, it changed how I approached things as an actor, as a Black man, essentially. So that's why I think this piece is so important to me, and it holds so much weight, and it's very dear to me because of the experiences that I've had along the way. I believe we started the tour back in 2017, 2018. So I've been with Richard and EBZB Productions, which is David and Serena's company, for quite some time. So we've grown together, and that's what I hold dear about it.
And my understanding is that this, while you have extensive theatrical backgrounds, this foray into film is relatively new, at least for this particular production. I was wondering if am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, you are. This is our first full feature film production with this company. We are a theatrical company that's toured for the last almost 3 decades nationally. with
Yeah.
productions. We had done broadcast before
Yeah.
with PBS broadcasts of some of our work, adapted into television scripts and screenplays. But
Yeah.
we had a very quick and steep learning curve of the difference between producing for broadcast and film. It was quick and it was steep, and I'll just say, I'll just chime in with this one little bit of credit. We could have done the learning curve was made that much easier because Ayanna Johnson was involved. Okay,
Yeah.
and she steered a lot of us in the way that we needed to be, that we needed to be directed. She was key.
And Ayana, can you speak a little bit about the kind of nature of the production and how and marshaling the resources that needed to kind of come together and what you saw as some of the chief challenges that needed to be overcome in that respect?
Sure. Well, David is also the executive producer, but he's also the lead. So one of my primary goals was to make sure that he was able to stay in character and not have to deal with the business, the day-to-day business during production. So I kind of took on more of that role. Production was don't want to say easy, but it was a little simpler because the first 11 days was all in one location. We found an awesome location, the theater, and we were able to shoot the majority of the film in those 11 days in that one location. So we didn't have to keep moving things around from location to location, just within that one theater. In the beginning, we worked really diligently to make sure we had the right team in place. I think that is really what led to the success of this project and being able to complete the project in the amount of time that we had with the budget that we had, is because we had true professionals. Most of them were local, but we had true professionals who came with the same goal in mind of achieving this amazing piece, putting it together. So like I said, most of our cast and crew were locally sourced. We did have a few that were outside of North Carolina, but the majority was within North Carolina. So I know David said it was that I helped steer that, and I really don't believe that. I think it was more the team that we were able to acquire to get this accomplished. We really worked well together. I did have to be a little bit of a beast sometimes, because there are rules, we have to complete things on time. We have to fill out documentations and forms and all of the stuff that most people don't like to do for films. I took on that responsibility so that everyone else could focus on the craft of making this film.
One of the things, go ahead.
Quinn, I'll just add, the reason why I say what I say about Ayanna is, and I think Jake can also attest to this, but particularly with my case, she protected me. She protected me as an actor. I was able to focus for the most part, on simply interpreting what was given to us. We were getting new pages of script each morning, and excuse me. Excuse me, but Ayanna protected me so that we only handled financial matters, production matters, any logistical issues, any problems, and there always are with particularly with an independent film, but any film or any project. But she protected me until the end of the day, or at the necessary time to handle those kind of other logistical issues. So that's why I say
I want to commend Ayanna as well and give her kudos because she's an actor as well. So actors know actors. So there were moments where it was like, hey, just go over in the corner, and develop what you need to develop. Because as David was saying, we were so used to Ian's script because we had done it so long in tour. So when we got these new pages and these new words, it's like, wait, whoa, what's happening here? We got to figure out what's going on. And she gave us the creative space to do that. We were on a time schedule. We were still on time, but we had those moments where it was like, go do what you need to do and come back and when you're ready. So I commend you for that, Ayanna. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
One of the things I thought was really interesting about this piece is it feels like, there's been a lot in the kind of cultural conversation that we've had in the world and as a country about who has the right to tell who the other person's stories, you know. If you're not from a community, you have the right to kind of speak for the community. And I'm curious, Jay, and David, feel free to jump in as well if you have thoughts on this. Of like, what do you think drew Richard Wright to Paul? Like, what was it that he saw in Paul that he thought could be specifically kind of help give shape to his work? And because I thought that was an interesting thing that was being explored, and I was wondering if you had a thought about that.
Yeah. Again, I think there is a mutual respect that Richard had for Paul. He mentions
Yeah.
that he tried to put up to him to the rising sun and
Yeah.
Abraham's bosom. So he was familiar with Paul's work. Um, it's hard for me to say Paul because I'm so used to saying Mr. Green. So he was familiar with Paul's work, and he knew. I think Richard was very cognizant of the people that he had around him. So there was a mutual respect for Paul, but I also think Richard wanted to let Paul know that, hey, there's a line here. You portray your characters in a way that, hey, let me whisper in your ear as a friend and say, hey, let's see if we can transition from this caricature into more of a character developed type atmosphere. So I think that's where Richard was, and Richard comes into that with that notion. He simply just wants to talk. And then I think as the conversation goes, it's like, wait, you need to know what's underlying what my argument is. There's a story, there's an experience that you will never be cognizant of, be privy to, because you weren't raised in these circumstances. You haven't walked life as I have walked them. And so I want to stay away from the word argument, but that is a fair word because it turns into a boxing match, and not so much there's blood on the floor, but that there's an understanding of you have to know this, and by you knowing this, you can approach your work differently, if that makes sense.
Is there a point of view amongst either of the two leads that you feel more kind of personally compelled by? Or
Well, I like
do
Richard's
you?
argument because I play
Yeah.
him. But no, I think a lot of times in people who have seen the play as well as the movie, I think their allegiances differ. Because
Mhm.
I think that lends well to the movie because you have to watch more than once to see where where your allegiances are going to stay. But because we have this conversation in a way that is presented, again, there's not an anger, there's a respect, there is
Mhm.
a love in this conversation. And so when you go back and you watch it and you see both points and you come in it wanting to see from each person's point of view, it can kind of go either way. Not to say that one person is completely wrong and one person is completely right. They both have valid arguments. And how do we get a solution? Is there a solution that we can get
Mhm.
from this conversation?
You know, I would, as I've said to practically, and Ayana has said this, Jay has said this, when we've been asked this, we're still processing this film, this project,
Mhm.
just as a cast. We still are, just like everybody else does when, and the audience responses have mirrored one another with this, in that folks want to see it again. Many folks have seen it again because they're still processing. We've been told often that this film lingers with you, and a lot of the critical responses noted that the film will linger with you. It does, and it still lingers with me. Um, I think one interesting perspective beyond our own perspectives is that of Ian Finley, who, again, the playwright and partly responsible for the screenplay as well. He said, they're both right in their own way. And that's what makes it such a delicate needle to thread, which is another thing, response that people have had. This is a very delicate needle to thread with this, because there'll be moments when you're thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, he's right. And then the next minute when Richard comes back with a rejoinder, and you realize, oh, wait a minute, I hadn't even considered that perspective. So they both have valid, genuine, authentic perspectives that I think we need to be candid by saying, let's embrace the discomfort of that,
Mhm.
and you know, and embrace it and be open to be candid and genuine about whatever conversations are generated because of their disagreement. That said, I grew up knowing about Paul Green because I grew up in a household that enjoyed history, and books, and we read a lot, and I couldn't help but be exposed to Paul Green. I've admired that man since I was a teenager,
Mhm.
particularly because of his social justice advocacy, his and other cultural and social justice work that he did. And I continue to emulate much of his life in whatever ways I can find possible. But at the same time, he was not a perfect man. Neither was Richard Wright. And so
Mhm.
I think Ian's point is well taken. You know, that they both have their
Mhm.
own genuine, authentic, and way of being respected.
Right. And I probably the purpose of art or theater, especially in film, is not necessarily to answer these questions for you, you know, but just to raise them. Ayana, can you kind of talk to me about the title, The Problem of the Hero, and where forgive me if this has already kind of been established in the discussion around the source material and everything, but I guess where did the title come from, and what do you think, what does it represent to you?
So the title, David mentioned in the beginning of this discussion, that there's a play within the play.
Yeah.
And so within that, that is the problem of the hero. The play that's within the play
Mhm.
is the problem of the hero. And so that's where the name for this production came from. We went back and forth about the title for it seems like months. It was native, it was months, it had to be. Natives, bright and green, I think it was at one point. And then finally settled on the problem of the hero, which I believe
Mhm.
is was the perfect choice. I think David, you guys made the right choice on that one. I was leaning more towards native, but
Mhm.
and I think the discussion that you guys were just having about which um, perspective do you lean towards, I think leads me to believe that The Problem of the Hero was the right title for this production for that specific reason. Because who's the hero in this discussion? I guess is up for debate, you know? And then the problem is all the challenges around that as well. That's my perspective. Now, David may have come up with The Problem of the Hero from a different reason, but it is within the production. It is the name of Wright's play within the play. And I thought it was aptly named for this production as well because of the challenges that each character faces in the production.
I also thought that something that was kind of interesting in this movie was that it kind of shows the mechanics of these conversations that are going on behind the scenes that are not centered on the director and the actors, but rather the playwrights. And I was curious of like, do you know what Orson? I mean, I was surprised to not just see Orson Welles come bulldoze in and just kind of be like, okay, well, we're going with that and we're doing this, and you know, and that he was kind of like part of the kind of scenery. Do you know what his perspective was on this particular scene, and how that kind of played out?
I
You
don't know how
know,
much
and
time we have, but I'll try to be as brief as possible.
yeah.
Um, uh, and again, boy, this gets really complicated, and it gets really intense when you think about it, particularly when it becomes to appropriation and perspective and personal agency and personal creative agency. Um, so Paul and Richard, in their friendship over the course of over a year, became really close friends and highly respectful of one another as they developed the script. Paul was under the impression that the script was fine and they would do minor adjustments, and did much of his work in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, as Richard went up with John Houseman and Orson Welles to finalize the actual production itself. There was a substantial disagreement, a true to life disagreement about this last ending. Paul firmly believed that in order to have a viable acceptance from the audience, that the character needed to have some level of redemption. Okay, needed to be redeemed. Richard felt very differently. Orson Welles and John Houseman felt strongly in support of Richard's perspective. Okay, and so we are representing accurately, while we dramatize the actual dialogue. We are dramatizing pretty accurately, I feel, what unfolded there in New York at the St. James Theater and in hotel rooms and other conversations. I think to us, as Ian, James A. Hodge, Sean, we felt it was crucial that we really focus and that the real story was in Richard and Paul's struggle to come to grips with what was the right ending and the personal agency that went with that. To focus on Orson Welles would have become a story about Orson Welles. Okay, that's why you don't see more of him in this piece. Plus, to try to emulate such an iconic figure would further distract from the real story in our minds. As I understand it, and there's no actual script that exists, that we've looked everywhere, even the families and the estates don't have it. They don't have the actual Broadway script, okay, with the ending that was used. So what you see is a conflation of the two endings in the film, okay? All right? Yet another fine needle to thread here. What actually happened was Paul, eventually with the knowledge of Richard, changed the ending and went to the agent Paul Reynolds to change the ending so that Paul's ending would end up in the published form, and that anything after the Broadway production would be Paul's ending. Okay, Richard said nothing. We can debate a lot of different reasons and think about a lot of different reasons why Richard said nothing in 1941, pre-World War II United States. Okay, we can debate a lot of different vantage points of that, and Jay may have some particular viewpoints on that too. Orson was furious. Both Orson Welles and Houseman were furious once they found out what had occurred. Didn't change it, but that's what precipitated a lot of what unfolded between Richard and Paul afterwards. The two never spoke again. Paul and Richard never spoke again. Paul, we do have evidence that Paul reached out within the next 6 months to a year. Richard never responded in kind, so they never spoke again. But I'm sorry to go on for a while, but yeah, it's complicated, and boy, does it really inform even greater perspective on the issues of personal agency and race and social.
Yeah, absolutely. That adds a lot of kind of more complexity to the dynamics here. And it sounds like there might need to be another movie about the making of this movie, but maybe a play first, and then you just kind of keep going down the rabbit hole. It's really
Quinn for that idea. We'll include you in the conceptual credits. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, well, I really, really appreciate you all sharing this film with us. It's definitely one that will kind of stick in your brain for a long time, and really look forward to seeing what comes next from you all. And I guess the last kind of question, maybe Ayanna, you can answer this, but anybody who has anything they want to add is just how can people kind of spread the word? Are there places that they can direct friends to go see this next, and how can people just kind of let other folks know about this film?
So we're excited that we're part of San Francisco's Indie Fest. So of course, we're happy that people came here to see the film. We're wrapping up our film festival circuit. But ebzb.org has a link to all the information related to this project. So we encourage everyone to go there. Again, is EBZB, as in EBZB Productions.org. And you can follow links. And we also have Facebook and Instagram profiles for the film. Again, you can follow EBZB on both platforms to get information on that as well.
And I'll just
And
chime
then,
in.
of course, everybody along on the production sharing it too. So we have it out there.
You'll find plenty of critical responses on Rotten Tomatoes. We're real pleased with how that's unfolding. And what Ayanna and Jay are not divulging yet, because they've been informed, but they haven't. But we're actually now able to announce that we'll next screen at Fargo Film Festival, which we're real pleased about. We're really pleased about that one, as well as Indie Fest, and then after that, New Hope Film Festival, and then I think we wrap up in May with a couple that are pending.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, best of luck to all of you on your journey, and congratulations on this piece. Really, really enjoyed it.
Gwen, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Take care.